Hello, welcome to another maths video tutorial at Gleaming Moon School, Umuahia. This is Mrs. Edith Igwe and we'll be looking at dividing powers of 10 in this video SF04. So grab your maths book and pen, follow all the instructions that I will give you, practice the example exercises and watch this video over and over and over. In no time, you will become a master of mathematics. In this video, our objective would be to divide whole numbers and decimals by powers of 10. And to do that, we're going to follow three processes. In our last video in SF03, we multiplied whole numbers and decimals by powers of 10. So we are going to look at the division part of that, where we divide whole numbers and decimals by powers of 10. So first of all, we'll need to do another recap on powers of 10, and we will divide numbers by positive powers of 10. So we look at how to divide numbers when the power of 10 is positive. And then we'll look at how to divide numbers by powers of 10 when it has a negative power. Okay. Now, to recap the powers of 10, this time I'm going to use the place value table. And that's what we have here. At the center of this table, you will see the units value, which is the ones. And as a power of 10, that is 10 raised to the power of 0. And when we go to the right, you remember we multiply by 10. So to move from the units to the tens, we multiply by 10, which would give us 10. And as a power of 10, 10 raised to the power of 1. To go to hundreds, we multiply again by 10, that's 100, which is 10 to power 2. And then to 1,000, multiply by 10, which is 1,000, and that's 10 to the power of 10, 3. For 10,000, we multiply by 10 to get 10,000, which is 10 to the power of 4. And then multiply again by 10 to get 100,000, which is 10 to the power of 5. Now, when we come back to this unit, now remember what we've done, we have gone towards the right, and you will notice that as we move towards the left, sorry about that, not towards the right, we have moved towards the left. So as we move towards the left, the number gets bigger. So this time we're going to move towards the right. And when we move towards the right, we will do the opposite of what we did when we moved towards the left. And when we move towards the left, we multiply by 10. So this time, the opposite of multiply is divide. So we will be dividing by 10. So 1 divided by 10 gives you 1/10. That's the 10th place value, which is 0.1. And as a power of 10, that gives you a -1 power. Now to move to 100th, you divide again by 10, which would give you 0.01 and a negative power of 2. To move to 1,000, you divide again by 10, and that gives you 0.001 and a negative power of 3. And then divide again by 10, you get 10,000, which is 0.0001 and a negative power of 4. And then to 100,000, you divide by 10 to get 0.00001, which is a negative power of 5. So again, you notice that as we move to the right, the number gets smaller. Right. Now, we're going to look at dividing by positive powers of 10. So we have two examples here, dividing a whole number by a positive power of 10 and dividing a decimal number by a positive power of 10. So if we have 13 divided by 10 raised to the power of 2, the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, what does 10 raised to the power of 2 mean? And from what we know about powers of 10, this means 100. Okay, so 10 raised to the power of 2 is 100. So if that is 100, then what we are doing would now be, we would now have 13 divided by 100. Okay, so we will have 13 divided by 100. So that's what we are doing. Now, in order to do this, we are going to use the long division method to see how this division is actually carried out. So you draw your line and draw your line, and inside you write 13, and then you write 100 because that's the number you're dividing 13 by. Okay, so you have 13 divided by 100. Now, the first question you're going to ask yourself is, can 100 divide 13? The answer clearly is no. And so we write 0 and put a decimal point. Okay, and then we go back to that 13, add 0 to make it 130. So now we can say 100 divide 130. So how many hundreds do we have in 130? There are 1 of them. So we will put 1 here. So 1 times 100 is going to give you 100. So you write 100 below 130, and then you subtract. Okay, so you draw your line and you subtract. So 130 minus 100 is going to give you 30. Okay, now we carry on with our division. Can 100 divide 30? Absolutely not. So we add 0 there to make it 300. So 100 divide 300 is going to give us 3. And 3 times 100 will give us what? 300. Okay, and then you subtract again. So you draw your line and subtract. And 300, take away 300, will give you 0. So that means you're done with your long division. And that means this is your answer. Okay, so the answer to 13 divided by 100 will give you 0.13. Okay, I will ask you to pause the video now and copy this illustration that I have shown you, including the long division, because I'm going to rub it off in order to have space to do the second example. So pause the video now and copy this down. Okay, so let's rub that off. Now we have our second example, 712.3 divided by 10 raised to the power of 3. Again, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what does 10 raised to the power of 3 mean? Okay, so we know that 10 raised to the power of 3 means what? 1000. Okay, so if it means 1000, that means what we are doing is 712.3 divided by 1000. Okay, so we need to divide these numbers. So if we have 712.3 divided by 1000, again, we will need to do our long division. But before we do that, notice that these two numbers are not in the same form. The numerator is a decimal number, whereas the denominator is a whole number. So in order to make this division easy for us, we need to make them both to become whole numbers. Okay, so now because the numerator is the one that needs to be made whole number, we will focus on that one. Okay, so now we have 1 digit after the decimal point. And in order to make this number with 1 decimal place a whole number, we multiply it by 1 with 1 0, which is 10. Okay, so to make that a whole number, we do 712.3 times, so we write 1. How many digits do we have after the decimal point? Is 1 digit, so you put 1 0. So that means it's times 10. And when you multiply that by 10, you will get 7,123. Okay, now we cannot do it just to the top number. You need to do the same thing to the denominator, which is the bottom number, in order to balance it up. Okay, so we come down here and then we go times 10. So if we multiply 1,000 by 10, we will get 10,000. Okay, so in other words, what we are doing is 7,123 divided by 10,000. Okay, 7,123 divided by 10,000. So that's what we are doing. So now we've gotten the numbers that we are dividing. We now do our long division. So you draw your line again and draw your line again. And then, so inside you write 7,123, and outside you write 10,000. Okay, so that's what we are doing now. So we are dividing 7,123 by 10,000. Now, obviously, we know that 10,000 is way greater than 7,123, so it will not work. At the top there, we write 0 and put the decimal point. Okay, so now we come back here, add 0, and now that's become 71,230. So how many 10,000s are in 71,230? There are 7 of them. So at the top there, you put 7. So 7 times 10,000 will give you what? 70,000. Okay, so you write 70,000, and then you draw your line and subtract. Okay, so you draw your line and you subtract. So 71,230 minus 70,000 will give you what? 1,230. Okay, so that's what's left. Now again, 10,000 cannot divide 1,230, so we add 0 there. And that makes it what? 12,300. And how many 10,000s are in 12,300? There are 1 of them. So we put 1 there. 1 times 10,000 will give us what? 10,000. So we write that below. Draw your line and subtract. Okay. Now the next thing is, if you subtract, what do you get? 12,300 minus 10,000 will give you 2,300. Okay, so again, we begin the round of division again. Can 10 divide 2,300? The answer is no. We put 0, and that makes it what? 23,000. How many 10,000s are in 23,000? There are 2 10,000s in 23,000. So you write 2 there, and 2 times 10,000, that's going to give you 20,000. Okay, so you also draw your line and subtract. Okay, so if you draw your line and subtract 23,000 minus 20,000, definitely going to give you 3,000. Okay, then we begin our round of division again. 10,000 cannot go into 3,000, so we add 0 at the top to make it 30,000. So 10,000 divide 30,000 is going to give you what? 3. And 3 times 10,000 would give you 30,000. So at this point, when we subtract, we are going to get 0. So 30,000 take away 30,000 will give you what? 0. And at that point, we have finished with our long division. And you can see that your answer is clear. This becomes our answer. Okay, and that means 712.3 divided by 10 raised to the power of 3 is equal to 0.7123. Again, I'm going to ask you, pause the video, copy all these illustrations that I've given you here, including this answer, because I am going to rub this off in order to carry on. Okay. Okay, thank you. Right, now I'm going to ask you to have a look at the 2 answers we have here, from the first example with a whole number to the second example with a whole number. Okay, what do you notice? To give you a clue, have a look at the decimal point. What has happened to the decimal point? And what connection does the decimal point have with the power of the 10? That's right. And that leads us to the rule number 1. And rule number 1 says that when you're dividing by a positive power of 10, you move the decimal point to the left by the same number of places as the value of the index. And remember, you can always add zeros as placeholders. Now, this rule makes it a whole lot quicker for us to solve these problems. So rather than doing all these illustrations that I've shown you and doing all the long divisions, but that part is important for you to actually understand the mathematics behind it. But the shortcut or the trick to that is this, what this rule have just said. Now look at this, 13 divided by 10 raised to the power of 2. What does the power say? The power says 2. And it says what? Move the decimal point to the left, okay, by the same number of places as the value of the index. Now remember, index is the same as power and it's also called the exponent. So the power says 2, and you know that for every whole number, the decimal point is at the end here, okay? So if the power says 2 and the decimal point is there, and the rule says move the decimal point to the left, left is this way, move it to the left by the same number of places as the value. So that means we're going to move this decimal point 2 places to the left. So if we go from here, we count 1 and 2. So we put another decimal point there. And remember, you can add 0 as placeholder. And so we put a 0 there. And that's how we got this answer, 0.13. So the same rule applies even when there is a decimal point. The only difference is that with a whole number, you are the one who remembers that the decimal point is at the end of the whole number. Whereas in a decimal number, you can see the decimal point where it is. So in this case, the power says 3. So we are going to move it to the left 3 places. So we go 1, 2, 3. So we put the decimal point there and add a 0 placeholder. And that's what gives us this answer, 0.7123. So copy the rule and copy these annotations that I've done here to show you how this rule works. And the next screen, you're going to have a set of questions that you're going to answer using this rule. Okay, so here we are. Evaluate the following. So pause the video, answer these questions, and in a minute, I will go through the answers. All right, so let's look at number 1, or let's see the answers first. Here are the answers. Get your pens out, give yourself ticks for the ones you got right. And if there are ones you didn't get right, pay attention as I explain and go through the answers one after the other. Right, so for the first one, again, following the rule, the power is 2. So that means we're going to move the decimal point to the left 2 places. So we go 1 and 2. So our new decimal point is here, which is why we have 7.1235. The power here says 1, so you move it to the left 1 place. The decimal point is there, and you move it there and put a 0 placeholder. And that gives you 0.3463, okay? And then the power here again is 1, decimal point is here, you move it 1 place, put the new decimal point there, and that gives you 3.845. The power here is 4, decimal point is there, you move it 4 times to the left, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You put your new decimal point there, put your 0 placeholder, another 0 placeholder, and then you need another 0 placeholder before the decimal point, which gives us 0.00751. Now, this is with the decimals. Now, with the whole numbers, remember that every whole number has an invisible decimal point at the end. So there's a decimal point at the end. The power says 3, so you move it 1, 2, 3, and put your new point there, and that gives you the answer. Power says 1, decimal point is at the end. You move it once and put your new decimal point there, and that gives you the answer. Now, does anybody remember what we said 10 raised to the power of 0 is? Absolutely, that is equal to 1. So if 10 raised to the power of 0 is equal to 1, basically what we are doing here is 12 divided by 1, which is equal to 12. Okay, so here power says 4, decimal point is there. You move it 4 times, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Put your new decimal place there and use 0 placeholders. And that gives you the answer 0.0389. Beautiful. Okay, so now let's look at dividing by powers of 10 when we have negative powers. Okay, so again, we are using the same examples, but the difference now is that their powers are negative. So when you have 13 divided by 10 raised to the power of -2. Now, let's have a look at this. What does it mean to have 10 raised to the power of -2? What does that mean? Now, you remember that negative power means 1 divide, okay? So we're going to have 1 divided by 10 raised to power 2, and 10 raised to power 2 is the same as 100, okay? So basically what we have here is 1 divided by 100. And if we have 1 divided by 100, that would give us 0.01, okay? So that's what we have here. So if we now match them up together, basically we have 13 divided by 0.01. So that's basically what we have. So we have equal to 13 divided by 0.01. Okay, that's basically what we have. 13 divided by 0.01. Now we will use our long division method to work it out. So you draw your line and draw your line. Okay, now before we use the long division method, there's something we need to do, just like we did with the second example when the power is positive. Now we have a decimal number here. In order to make it easier for us to do that, we need to change this decimal number to become a whole number, okay? And to do that, you remember the number of place value, decimal places, or the number of digits after the decimal point will tell you what you multiply this by to get a whole number, okay? So we have 2 digits after the decimal point. So that means we will be multiplying by 1. And how many zeros? 2 zeros, because there are 2 digits. So that is multiplied by 100. So if we multiply that by 100, we're going to get 1. 0.01 times 100 gives us what? 1. Okay? So, and remember, to balance it up, we do exactly the same thing to the number above, the numerator. So we do times 100. Okay? So 13 times 100 is definitely going to give us 1300, or you can call it 1300. Okay, so if that's what we have, technically what we are doing now is 1300 divided by 1. That's what we are doing now, isn't it? So we are doing 1300 divided by 1, and 1300 divided by 1 would be equal to what? Will be equal to the same thing, 1300. So our answer becomes 1300. So that is why 13 divided by 10 raised to the power of -2, it will be equal to 1000. 300. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is to, let me just change this so that that would not block the sign, because I'm going to ask you to copy this. So what we've done here is 13 divide by 0.01. So I need to put that arrow there to show you what I've done. So I'm going to ask you again to pause the video and copy these illustrations that I've done here, including the annotations, because I'll be rubbing them off by the time we do example number 2. Thank you. Okay, so example number 2. Now we have 712.3 times 10 raised to the power of minus 2. Again, starting with the power of 10, 10 raised to the power of negative 2, negative 3 rather, not negative 2, is going to be the same as 1 divided by 10 raised to negative 2. So if we have 1, 10 raised to the power of 3 is 1000. Okay, so the negative part tells us is 1 divided by, remember. And then because the power is 3, we have 1000. So 10 raised to the power of minus 3 is the same as 1 divided by 1000. And we know that 1 divided by 1000 is going to be equal to 0.001. So in other words, what we are doing is 712.3 divided by 0.001. So let me draw an arrow again to point us to that. So this is what we are doing. Okay, so that leaves us with 712.3 divided by 0.001. Okay, so put the division line there. So that's what we are doing. Okay, now again, just like in the last one, we need to make these numbers to be whole number for it to be easy to work out. Okay, so now 712.3 has 1 decimal place. You only need to multiply it by 10 to make it a whole number. But if you multiply 0.001 by 10, you will still end up with 0.01. So because we need both of them to have the same, to be whole numbers, we need to use the bottom one, which has 3 decimal places. So because it has 3 decimal places, we are going to multiply it by 1 with how many zeros? 3 zeros. That is 1000. So we need to multiply that by 1000 and it will give us 1. And then for the top number, we also multiply it by 1000 in order to balance it up. Okay, and that would give us, so 712 times 1000 will give us what? Now, let me show us how we actually get to this one. You're multiplying by 1000. Remember in our last video, SFO3 multiplying by powers of 10, you move the decimal point to the right when you multiply by positive powers of 10. So now here we have 1000, that's 1000, multiply this, we move this 3 times because there are 1, 2, 3 zeros. So we move the decimal point 3 places to the right. So if we go 1, 2, 3, so it moves the decimal point here. And remember, when you have the decimal point at the end of the number, it makes it a whole number, which is why we have 1 here. And in this case, we move the decimal places 3 times. The decimal point, we move it 3 times. So we go 1, 2, and 3, and put the decimal point there, which is at the end of the number. So that means we need to put a 0 placeholder here and another 0 placeholder here. Okay, so that leaves us with 7123 with 2 zeros. So that is 712,300. Okay, so this one is dead easy. So that means 712.3 divided by 10 raised to the negative power of 3 is equal to 712,300. Okay, so I'm going to ask you again to copy these illustrations and annotations, okay, before I rub it off. Okay, so now I am going to ask you a question. I want you to have a look at what we've done, just like we checked in the other one when the power is positive. What have you noticed about the answers in relation with the power, okay, you can see that here the decimal point was after 3 and the power is what? 2, and we moved it 2 times to the right, 1, 2, and put 0 placeholders there to get this answer. And here the decimal point was there and we moved it 3 times to the right, 1, 2, 3. And then for these 2 parts, we filled it in with 0 placeholder. So that brings us to rule number 2. And rule number 2 says that when dividing by a negative power of 10, you move the decimal point to the right by the same number of places as the value of the index. And that is exactly what I've shown you here. And remember, you can add zeros as placeholders. Okay, so you can also copy these annotations, the rule number 2, and then the next screen is going to show you some exercises which you're going to do based on this rule. Okay, so here are the exercises. Pause the video on your book, answer these questions, and I will show you the answers so you can check how well you've done. Right, let's have a look at the answers. Here are the answers. Get your pen, mark yourself for the ones you got right, and the ones you didn't get right, you listen as I explain them one after the other. So now we have 712.35 times 10 raised to the power of negative 2. And exactly the same thing the rule says, you move your decimal point 2 places to the right. The power says 2, so you're going to the right. And so you go 1, 2. So your decimal point becomes here, and that makes this a whole number. Here, the power says 1, so you're moving it to the right once. So your decimal point moves from here to here. So that gives you 34.63. Again, negative 1, decimal point, you move it 1 place to the right, and that gives you 384.5. And here you have a negative of 4, a negative power of 4. So that means you're going to move your decimal point 4 places to the right. So you go 1, you go 2, you go 3, and you go 4. So you have 1, 2, 3 places that you need to hold with 0. And that is why you have 751,000. Right here. So we've done with decimal numbers where you can see the decimal points and physically move them. But here, you cannot see the decimal point, but we know that the decimal points appear at the end. So that means with negative power 3, you move 1, 2, 3. So you simply just add 3 zeros. That's it. You add 3 zeros for these 3 places, and that gives you 7,542,000. And here, you simply add 1 0. So your decimal point is there, you move it to the right once, put your 0 placeholder, that's 6,150. Now, again, like we did in the last one, 10 raised to the power of 0 is equal to 1. So basically what you are doing is 12 divided by 1, which is the same as 12. And in this case, your negative power is 4. So that means you're going to add 4 zeros, and that gives you 3,890,000. Okay, so check your answers. If there are ones that you didn't get right, follow my explanations and make your correction. Okay, so what have we learned? We have done SFO3, which is the previous video before this one, multiplying by powers of 10. And now we have done SFO4, dividing by powers of 10. And we have looked at dividing both whole numbers and decimal numbers by positive powers of 10 and by negative powers of 10. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to complete the quiz for this lesson, SFO4 divided by powers of 10. And you can find that quiz on our WhatsApp group. If you're a GMS pupil, ask your parents. They should be in our WhatsApp group, and the link to the quiz is there. They should follow that link so you can answer the quiz. Or you can find the link to the quiz on our Facebook page, Gleaming Moon School. On the other hand, you can get in touch with the admin who can send you the link. Okay, our next lesson is going to be SF05. Now, if you remembered in this series, I told you the main series is standard form. We are learning how to work with standard form, how to convert numbers from decimal notation to standard form, from standard form to decimal notation, and how we can calculate with standard form, like multiply numbers that are in standard form, divide numbers that are in standard form, and so on and so forth. But I told you that you needed some basic skills first before you can work in standard form. And we have gone through all these basic skills in these 4 videos. So we have looked at the powers of 10 to understand what powers of 10 are, to understand. We've also looked at standard form in general, where we understood what standard form is, how we can differentiate between a standard form and a number that looks like standard form, but actually is not standard form. And we looked at powers of 10. We looked at decimal numbers and whole numbers, learning how to convert a whole number into a decimal number, and so on and so forth. And then we divided by powers of 10 and multiplied by powers of 10. So our next lesson, we are now delving properly into standard form, where we will now convert numbers from standard form into decimal notations and from decimal notations to standard form. So our next lesson will be the first part, SF05, where we change numbers or write numbers from standard form to decimal notation. So I'm going to see you next lesson. Be ready for that lesson. Make sure that you've watched all 4 videos and make sure that you fully understand these skills, because I'm not going to talk about these skills when we get to SF05, standard form to decimal notation, because I will be expecting that you already have the foundational skills that we need for this topic. So I will see you next lesson. Bye-bye.